They said his mailbox was an eyesore. Just a plain black metal box on a weathered wooden post. Functional, sturdy, unremarkable, until Karen Whitmore decided it wasn't aesthetic enough for her perfect neighborhood. The letter came with threats of fines, $200 per day until he tore it down and replaced it with something more harmonious. John Thompson stood on his front porch, gripping the notice, his knuckles white. He had served his community as a firefighter for decades, risking his life to save others. He'd bought this house with his life savings, built memories in its walls, and watched seasons change from his porch. And now, a petty tyrant was threatening him over a mailbox. Karen's words echoed in his mind, dripping with condescension. "Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson. Either comply or face the consequences." She said it with a smile, a cold, satisfied grin that spoke of power abused, of control wielded like a weapon. She wasn't protecting property values. She was protecting her throne as Queen of Maple Avenue. She had done this before, bullying neighbors into submission, crushing individuality under the weight of her so-called community standards. And she always won. But Karen had made one crucial mistake. She underestimated John. She saw an old man, quiet and unassuming, and thought he would bow to her will. She had no idea who she was dealing with. John looked at the letter again, his anger hardening into resolve. If Karen wanted a fight, she was going to get one. And this time, she was going to lose. Because what started as a petty power play over a mailbox was about to become a battle that would shake the entire neighborhood. And the golden throne he planned to build would be the symbol of her downfall. But let's start at the beginning. John Thompson had always been a simple man. A retired firefighter with calloused hands and a heart of gold, he valued peace, quiet, and the comfort of his modest home on Maple Avenue. It wasn't just a house to him. It was a sanctuary, bought with his life savings and filled with memories. The smell of morning coffee drifting through the kitchen, the sound of neighborhood kids laughing, the sight of autumn leaves dancing in his front yard. Everything about this place was home, and his mailbox was no exception. It was plain, sure, just a black metal box on a weathered wooden post, its paint chipped by years of rain and sun. But it was sturdy and reliable, a silent sentinel that had faithfully delivered birthday cards, bills, and letters for over a decade. To John, it wasn't just a mailbox. It was a piece of his life. Then came the letter, an official-looking envelope, crisp and impersonal, marked with the bold logo of the Maple Avenue Homeowners Association. John's heart sank the moment he saw Karen Whitmore's name at the bottom. "Dear Mr. Thompson, it has come to our attention that your mailbox does not comply with the aesthetic standards set by the Maple Avenue HOA. As stated in Section 4.3b, all mailboxes must be visually appealing and in harmony with the community's appearance. Your mailbox, in its current state, fails to meet these standards. You are hereby ordered to replace your mailbox within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in a $200 fine per week until the issue is resolved. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore, HOA President." John's jaw tightened. Karen Whitmore was notorious in the neighborhood, sharp-tongued and iron-fisted when it came to enforcing her vision of perfection. He had heard the stories. Neighbors fined for garden gnomes deemed too whimsical, for front doors painted the wrong shade of red, even for lawn chairs that didn't blend with the landscape. Karen was a stickler for rules, but only when it suited her. Her own yard boasted an ostentatious fountain with cherubs spouting water, hardly harmonious, but no one dared to challenge her. John shook his head, his disbelief quickly giving way to anger. His mailbox was functional. It wasn't broken or rusted. It was just plain. "Not aesthetic enough?" he muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Who decides what's aesthetic anyway? He wasn't the type to cause trouble. After all, he was a man of principle, someone who had always followed the rules, paid his dues, and minded his own business. But this felt wrong. It felt unfair. And if there was one thing John couldn't stand, it was a bully hiding behind a rule book. Determined to settle this peacefully, John decided to attend the next HOA meeting. Maybe if he explained his point of view, Karen would understand. Maybe she'd see reason. The meeting was held in the stuffy clubhouse at the end of Maple Avenue. John arrived early, his letter in hand, rehearsing his words. He was polite but firm as he spoke, explaining that his mailbox was functional, well-maintained, and not causing any harm. Karen barely looked up from her stack of paperwork. "Mr. Thompson, our community has standards," she said, her voice cold and clipped. "It's about maintaining property values. Your mailbox, well, it's an eyesore." Her words were laced with condescension, her eyes flicking over him like he was something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. John's face flushed. "An eyesore? It's a mailbox, not a sculpture." He could feel the heat rising in his chest, his fists clenching at his sides. Karen's lips curled into a thin smile. "Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson. Either comply or face the consequences." Her tone was icy, unyielding. There was no room for compromise. The room fell silent. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding his gaze. No one dared to speak up, not against Karen. Her power was absolute, her authority unquestioned. John looked around, his heart sinking. It was clear she wasn't going to budge, and no one was going to help him. He was alone in this fight. Fine, he thought, his jaw setting with determination. If she wanted an aesthetic mailbox, she'd get one. But it wouldn't be anything like she expected. John Thompson was a man of quiet wit and stubborn resolve. If Karen Whitmore wanted aesthetic, she was about to get a masterpiece of absurdity. Armed with determination and a mischievous grin, John set off on his mission. His first stop was the local hardware store, where he picked up cans of the shiniest gold spray paint money could buy. Next was an antique shop that specialized in eccentric decor. The shopkeeper's eyebrows shot up as John placed faux velvet fabric, miniature lion statues, and ornate embellishments on the counter. "You starting a theater production or something?" the man joked. John simply winked, replying, "Nope, just upgrading my mailbox." For the next few days, John was a man possessed. His garage became a workshop of creativity and defiance. He spray-painted the wooden post with layers of glistening gold, letting each coat dry to a reflective shine. He upholstered a small wooden seat with plush red velvet, crafting it to look like a regal throne cushion. The miniature lion statues were attached to the armrests, their golden eyes gleaming with a royal glare. At the very top, the mailbox itself sat like a royal decree, its flap adorned with golden filigree that sparkled in the sunlight. It was gaudy, ridiculous, and gloriously over the top. It was perfect. By the end of the week, the mailbox stood proudly at the edge of his lawn, a golden throne fit for a king. It was a sight to behold. The sun reflected off its gilded surfaces, giving it an almost blinding brilliance. Neighbors gathered, laughter and whispers filling the street. Some took pictures, others simply stood in stunned silence. One elderly man wiped tears of joy from his eyes, patting John on the back. "This is the best thing to happen to this street in years," he chuckled, his shoulders shaking with laughter. The joy was short-lived. The next morning, a knock at the door echoed through John's house. Opening it, he found Karen Whitmore standing on his porch, her face flushed with fury. Her eyes were locked on the golden monstrosity gleaming in the morning sun. "What is that? That abomination?" she demanded, her voice trembling with rage. Her finger jabbed toward the mailbox, as if she could banish it with sheer willpower. John leaned casually against the porch railing, crossing his arms with a nonchalant smile. Oh, that? That's my new mailbox. I made sure it was as aesthetic as possible. It's quite harmonious with the community, don't you think? His voice was dripping with faux innocence. Karen's face turned a shade of crimson he didn't think was possible. Her eyes narrowed to slits. You're mocking the HOA's regulations. This is a direct violation of community standards, she snapped, her voice shaking. John's grin widened. Actually, Karen, your letter said it needed to be visually appealing and harmonious with the community. You never specified how. And if I recall correctly, the HOA bylaws don't restrict creativity. He watched as her composure cracked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. For a moment she was speechless, her mind racing to find a retort. Finally, she managed to sputter, This isn't over, Thompson." Her voice was a mixture of fury and frustration. She spun on her heel, her heels clicking furiously on the pavement as she stormed off. John watched her retreat, his laughter bubbling up as he leaned against the porch railing. He had never felt so alive. But even as the joy surged through him, he knew this was just the beginning. Karen wouldn't back down without a fight, and if that was the case, he was more than ready for round two. After all, this golden throne wasn't just a mailbox. It was a declaration of independence. Karen Whitmore wasted no time retaliating. Just a week after John's golden throne mailbox had stolen the spotlight, a formal notice of violation appeared in his mailbox. Ironically, delivered straight into the gilded seat. The letter was brutal, accusing John of disrupting community harmony and labeling his mailbox as inappropriate. The fine? $200 per day until it was removed. John's blood boiled. It wasn't just about the mailbox anymore. It was about principle. He wasn't going to be bullied into submission by Karen's iron grip on the HOA. Determined to fight back, John reached out to his old friend, Mark Reynolds, a retired attorney known for his sharp mind and love for a good battle. Over coffee at John's kitchen table, they pored through the HOA bylaws, searching for any loophole. Mark's finger tapped the page as a grin spread across his face. There's nothing here that defines what aesthetic means. It's all subjective. Karen's enforcing her personal taste, not a rule. John's eyes lit up. Karen was exploiting ambiguity to control the neighborhood, and now he had the ammunition he needed. But he knew he couldn't fight her alone. He needed the support of his neighbors. It was time to rally the troops. He went door to door, talking to his neighbors, listening to their stories of frustration. They poured out their grievances, fines for garden gnomes, penalties for holiday lights, even warnings about the color of doormats. People were tired of Karen's micromanagement. They were just waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to her. And that someone was John. Fueled by a sense of justice, John organized a neighborhood meeting at his house. It was packed, living room, kitchen, even the front yard filled with neighbors eager to be heard. Emotions ran high as people shared their stories, their voices trembling with anger and frustration. One woman recounted how Karen made her repaint her front door twice because the color wasn't approved. Another man was fined for his daughter's chalk drawings on the sidewalk, labeled as vandalism. It was clear the community was ready for change. But John didn't stop there. He knew Karen's power relied on her reputation, so he took his story to the local news. He pitched it as a battle of individuality versus authoritarianism, of community spirit against dictatorship. The reporter's eyes gleamed with excitement, and within days the news segment aired, "Man fights HOA with golden throne mailbox." The footage showed John standing proudly beside his masterpiece while Karen stormed away, refusing to comment. The story went viral, sparking public outrage and support from strangers all over the city. But if John thought he'd won, he was mistaken. Karen's fury was relentless. She called for an emergency HOA vote, pushing for a new bylaw that would explicitly ban thematic or extravagant mailboxes. It was her way of rewriting the rules to maintain her power. John read the agenda, his fists tightening. This was no longer about a mailbox. It was about freedom, fairness, and standing up to a bully. He realized that Karen wasn't just trying to remove his mailbox. She was trying to silence his voice. He needed one last move to turn the tide. And this time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for his neighborhood. For everyone who had been silenced, intimidated, and controlled by Karen's reign of terror. The battle wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. The community center buzzed with anticipation on the night of the HOA vote. Neighbors filled every chair, whispering nervously, eyes darting between John and Karen. At the front, Karen Whitmore stood with the confidence of a queen, her chin held high and her voice sharp. "We cannot allow one man to undermine the aesthetic integrity of our neighborhood. This mailbox is a mockery, and we must set a precedent." Her words were cold and calculated, dripping with authority. She motioned to the voting ballots, already seeing victory in her grasp. John watched from the back, his arms crossed, his face calm but determined. He could feel the tension in the room, the weight of expectation heavy on his shoulders. But he stood his ground, his resolve unwavering. This was more than just a mailbox. It was about standing up to a bully. Karen's voice rang out with smug certainty. "The new bylaw banning extravagant mailboxes will ensure our community's harmony." Harmony. The word echoed in John's mind, twisted by Karen to justify her control. He felt his anger rise, his hands tightening into fists. She wasn't protecting harmony. She was protecting her power. Clearing his throat, John stepped forward, breaking the silence. "Before we vote, I'd like to share something." His voice was steady, echoing through the room. Every eye turned to him, the air thick with anticipation. He walked to the front, a thick folder in his hands. "These are signatures from over half the neighborhood. They support my mailbox because it brings joy and individuality. Isn't that what community is about?" Karen's confident smile vanished. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages, her face paling as she saw the overwhelming support. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, hope flickering in their eyes. But John wasn't done. And according to HOA Bylaw 8.4, any amendment requires a 2/3 majority. "I don't think you have the numbers, Karen." His words were sharp, a checkmate that shattered her illusion of control. Karen's face flushed, her hands shaking. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She had miscalculated. Her grip on power was slipping. The vote was cast, and just as John predicted, the amendment failed. The room erupted in applause, neighbors cheering, their faces bright with victory. Karen stood frozen, her authority crumbling before her eyes. Her shoulders slumped as she gathered her papers, her face etched with humiliation. She walked out without a word, the sound of her heels echoing as her reign ended. John watched her leave, a wave of relief washing over him. It was over. The golden throne would stay, not just as a mailbox, but as a symbol of individuality and defiance. It was more than just gold paint and velvet. It was justice. The next morning, John stood on his porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunlight dance on the golden throne. As the mail carrier dropped letters into the royal mailbox, John smiled. Who would have thought a mailbox could change everything? Justice never looked so good in gold.